Yeah, very quick one. Adriana Di Liberto, Università di Cagliari. I'd like to know if you believe that there is also a gender issue in the sense that there is a, if you look at the data, women invest more in human capital than men, or dropouts rate are much higher among younger cohorts of men than for women. So I'd like to ask you if countries that do more on gender policy issues will have a higher competitiveness in the future.
Thank you. So who wants to try to give answers? Carlos first, let's have this in a row.
That's a third.
Very quickly, starting with the gender issue, in reality, the World Bank, we have a flagship report called the World Development Report. Every year we focus on one topic, and this year is exactly on gender. And connecting this to the situation of the Middle East, North Africa, when I said that to look at the youth unemployment is a very important issue, I would go one step beyond. I would also say to look at the gender issue is very important, because if we look at North Africa and the Middle East in general, it was the region with the highest level of youth unemployment in the world and with the lowest level of female participation in the workforce in the world. So a few years ago, we prepared a report which is entitled Gender as Smart Economics. And it's looking both ways, because in many cases in sub-Saharan Africa, it's not the female employment, it's the male employment, particularly in those countries that come out of conflict, how you absorb them in the labor force in a proper way, which is fundamental. So, yes, I fully agree that you have to look at these dimensions. You have to be careful, however, with quantitative targets. The best way to approach, and I guess along the lines of what Stefano said in terms of apprenticeships and partnership between the public and the private sector, this is fundamental. To establish very specific targets, this is very difficult to implement.
Stefano, and then Elizabeth.
Thank you. Telegraphic.
Yeah.
Just a couple of points on gender. The interesting thing of the crisis, if you look just at the aggregate data, is that the men have been more affected than women. If you go a little bit deeper and you look within industry, you find that women affected more by men within sectors. Largely in a number of countries, because women had more represented among those on temporary contracts, on precarious jobs. We also have an initiative, the gender initiative at the OECD, that will be presented at our ministerial meeting next year. You have to look at three things. Education, access to quality education, that's essential. It is still an issue in a number of countries. Girls tend to be more educated than men now, those entering into the labor market, but the type of field of study is still different, and therefore these still create problems for them to integrate into the labor market. Employment. There are still issues, even in the OECD country, about discrimination. Subtle forms of discrimination still have to be tackled. And in Europe, there's been a lot of initiatives with the directives. Third, entrepreneurship. There is a lot of potential for women also to contribute to entrepreneurship, to build new companies, to actually develop new initiatives. That, I think, are the three key issues. I fully agree with Carlos about this quantitative. I mean, the shares of young people into companies is a risky attitude. The point I was making before about apprenticeship is that there is a sincere effort by many countries to try to promote apprenticeships, but you need an institutional setting. It's very difficult, it takes time before you can build effective apprenticeships. In Germany, this has been there for many years, in Austria, in Denmark, and so on. I think my point is that we should invest now on these kind of schemes, because I think one of the lessons we have learned, I think all of us, is that while we have managed over the past 2 decades to promote better employment outlook, lower structural unemployment, I think we miss a little bit how policy can be adapted after a major shock to actually help the many more people might be at risk of losing their job. So how you adjust policy in a crisis to make it more effective, I think it's the issue. And please, I don't think there is a trade-off between young and older people, of workers. I think all the evidence and the attempt that were made in the 80s to send people in earlier times so that we can create jobs for young people have failed dramatically. There is no such a thing as a substitution or a job, the same job for a young person taking the job of an older person. There is a question of creating a condition for great jobs, and there will be different jobs for older people as well as for younger people. I think that's the kind of policy we should aim at, rather than think that we can control the absolute, the total quantity of jobs, and then we can allocate them through policies.
Thank you. Elizabeth.
So I agree with the importance of apprenticeship programs. However, I should notice that, for example, in a country like Austria, companies are actually trying to withdraw for cost reasons from those programs. So it really would be quite important to have new models, public-private partnerships with more involvement from the state to really go a step further, and also to develop modern systems of apprenticeships, in the sense that it's always very difficult to know what the skills are that you need in 2 to 5 years from now, and this is sort of one of the issues that has to be addressed in this respect. As far as the women are concerned, I would also add sort of to the policies that were already mentioned, and the policies that are quite important are the possibility to combine family life with work participation. And those countries that have done well in that respect are really the ones where female labor force participations are high. And by the way, also sort of fertility rates are high. So this is not something that's excluded, and I think this is an important point. Let me add one last point, because I thought that this issue of Mr. Braga was important, about the trust in the societies, and sort of societies with high trust actually also did well in growth. That really having sort of large segments or considerable segments of a workforce or population that are excluded is really something that's very dangerous, and that we should address. And in sort of the region that I was talking about, for example, the issue of minorities is a very important issue that also should at least be mentioned once, because there are sort of certain minorities in these countries that seem to be permanently excluded from the labor market, and they have to be also taken into account. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think we had a very lively and interesting panel. I learned a lot. 2 messages for the next panel, or for the following one. First, this problem is not going to disappear, not in months, maybe in years, but if we don't do anything, it's not necessarily true that this will disappear by itself. That is a clear message, not just for policymakers, but also for companies, because we understood that the perspective of an economy mainly is due to the behavior of private sector is affecting the reaction, the resilience, and so the private sector has a special responsibility on that. Second, we have a special problem with young people, not only in OECD countries, but also in other countries. Especially, I would say, in Italy, we have a serious problem of risk of social exclusion. We didn't treat this issue this morning, but a lot of young people are leaving the country, trying to get better opportunities outside. And also, in this case, I think the private sector has a special responsibility in order to attract good people, pay them accordingly to their skills and to their professional skills and education. And this is, again, a very big challenge for all of us. So we are just a few minutes late. Sorry for that. We have a coffee break now, and I think that someone will guide us to the coffee break.